Hey everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology for October 21st through 27th, 2024. We are getting into the last day of Libra season today and even into the beginning of tomorrow. And believe it or not, at least I'm saying this to myself, we are going to have the sun in Scorpio on Tuesday. Tuesday, October 22nd. Feels a little bit early this year. And so we've got a whole new season to talk about. And as a Scorpio, I get to give you all the deep insights into the sign. And it also means that we're beginning to wrap up eclipse season. So this is eclipse season, as you probably know, because I've been talking about it for a while. It is these two periods each year, usually two periods, where we really see a lot of transitions and sometimes even major personal events around these dates. We had a solar eclipse back on October 2nd, so we are still in the lunar month that had a solar eclipse. And even as I record this, we're beginning to come to that last leg of the lunar month because we will have a new lunar month to talk about. Next week on November 1st, we will have a Scorpio new moon. So that said, if you are watching live, do say hello. It's always nice to see where everybody is watching from. And for those that do not know who I am, my name is Katie Sweetman, and I'm an astrologer and psychic medium located in the rolling hills of Central Maryland. And every week we gather live to look at the astrology. And you hear me say every week, the astrology is 50%, you are the other 50%. So I see some familiar faces in the chat. Always good to see you. And how are we feeling as we wrap up Libra season, a season that becomes a major focal point even into the next few months because of that solar eclipse that we had on October 2nd. And it says that relationships and connections and how we talk to each other, how we socialize, how we interact will continue to be a major focal point even into the new year. But that said, we are coming to the last day of Libra season. And even as we come to the end of Libra season, we've got that last square to Pluto. So sort of jumping ahead a little bit, we will have Sun square Pluto into tomorrow. I wanted to quickly mention that. I'll come back to it because this is the last square to Pluto that we will have, Pluto and Capricorn, that we will have in our lifetime. So there is something that is wrapping up, even if we don't quite realize it, because in about 4 weeks time, 4 weeks time, we will have Pluto go back into Aquarius, where it will be for 20 years. I know, it's crazy. And it means that we are wrapping up that 16-year story of Pluto in Capricorn. So let's get into Scorpio season. So astrology is many things. It's a calendar, it's a clock, it's a way for us to tell time, both personal time, both collective time. I know many of us are exposed to astrology through horoscopes and even looking at our own personal astrology. Your own chart is your clock. It's your space. It's your map. There's many different analogies that we can use. It's one of the reasons I love working with clients and talking to them about their astrology. But when we look at, let's say, the astrology on a weekly basis, we're looking at collective time. So we have been through, the sun has been going through Libra. We had the equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere. It's the end, was the end of summer. Now we're in autumn. I realize we've got people watching, we got friends in the Southern Hemisphere, and you are starting the opposite. You're starting the spring equinox and you're going into spring. And astrology also talks about the seasons of life, both literally and sort of the growing season and how we time things in our life. And astrology also talks about metaphor and symbology and archetypes. So symbolic time, metaphoric time, archetypical time. And every time the sun goes into Aries, I realize we're 6 months, almost 7 months away from that date, but that's a time to restart, to re-begin, but that's even a word. And Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, so it sort of initiates, it brings us into the rebirth of life after winter. But we don't have to wait to the equinox, and usually around the 19th or 20th, the 21st of March, to experience Aries. So every time you want to take action and you want to move forward, you are calling upon the energies and the archetypes of Aries. We even had an Aries full moon last week. It was a little spicy. How are you guys feeling? But so we go through the zodiac each year, and we start the zodiac year with the sun going into Aries, and we get to halfway through the astrological year. The sun is in Libra, and Libra is the counter to Aries. Libra, as a sign of relationships, says to Aries, says to this energy, hey, do not forget about other people. It's great that we can stand on our own 2 feet, that we can take action, that we know what we want, and we're going after what we want. But at the same time, we don't live in a vacuum. We have relationships, we have connections, and we need to learn to negotiate and to compromise. And that's how these two signs do their dance. When the sun goes into Scorpio, and I realize this is very northern hemisphere biased, I'm so sorry for those that are watching the southern hemisphere, we are now crossing into a part of the season where the days are getting shorter, and the days are typically getting colder depending on where you are. I'm here in the sort of mid-Atlantic of the United States of America, and that symbolically represents the descent. So each day going forward all the way to the winter solstice, typically around December 21st each year, the days are getting darker, darker, darker. So Scorpio stands between the equinox and the solstice, sort of marks this halfway point. And when the sun goes into Scorpio, we enter a sign. It is a water sign. It is a sign that talks about the finiteness of life. That's the thing. Life begins. We see that with Aries. We see that with Taurus. Taurus is the sign that's opposite of Scorpio, and life ends. And it does this dance. And it doesn't mean that we have to actually experience death. At every moment where we hold our breath, we pause, in a way, is to have that stop and that opening into new life, the breath that's in. So it's to show that Scorpio is everywhere, and Scorpio represents a necessity to go within. So one of the ways I frame Scorpio, and I'm saying this as a Scorpio, is that imagine a life where nothing happens. Everything is easy, and you're thinking, sign me up, I want that life. Imagine a life where you never examine yourself. You never look inward. You never question yourself. You never question your motives. And like I said, nothing ever happens. So do you grow? Absolutely not. So the necessity of Scorpio is to bring us into a space where we look at ourselves, where we are sometimes confronted by life, where we have to question our motives, where we need to be vulnerable, and where we touch upon themes of intimacy, trust. Scorpio falls after Libra. If Libra is relationships and there's no trust, there's no intimacy, it's just a surface connection. And this isn't about romantic relationships, it's not about sex, even though Scorpio can get into themes about sexuality. But when a relationship has nothing to it, it doesn't have much of a bond. It's sort of, like I said, surface. It's the people you see like, day to day, like at a coffee shop or something. It's just acquaintances. And so Scorpio in that energy and that archetype allows us to open up ourselves to somebody else. And this could be a best friend, this could be a colleague, this could be a lover. And we need that emotional energy to create an emotional bond. And this is a little bit of a tense example, but imagine you've gone through this big crisis in your life, and maybe you've shared that crisis with somebody else. You've gone through something, you've witnessed something, and that will sometimes bond two people together. Scorpio also reminds me of the people in our life that we know that we could call up in the middle of the night, or if something happened, we know that they would be there. That's that type of energy. And if you are a Scorpio, or if you know a Scorpio, when that trust is broken, it's very difficult to regain it. And this is just more from a personality level, but on a collective level, because we are all going into Scorpio season, and even if you're thinking, but I'm not a Scorpio, how is this relevant to me? Scorpio is somewhere in your personal zodiac. When you were born, you have a sun sign and you have all 11 signs around you. So Scorpio actually could be a relationship sign. It could be a career sign. It could be health and wellness, for example. But we in astrology, we have collective time. So collective time is the sun going into Scorpio and the collective experience of us navigating this rather intense archetype. We have personal time. This is time that's specific to our sun sign and our rising sign. So on a collective level, we are going into a sign that turns the mirror onto us, that makes us question ourselves, that gets us into uncomfortable spaces. Scorpio is also the psyche. Scorpio, at least from a modern lens, talks about the psyche, psychology, psychological motivation. Traditionally, Scorpio is death, taxes, estates, wills, inheritances. I know that doesn't sound very interesting, but that's more of a traditional lens. They weren't thinking about psychology 2,000 years ago. But Scorpio really, as a water sign, and I'll get into what water means in a moment, and it's ruled by Mars, the bravery and courage, Mars, to go into emotional spaces that are intimate and vulnerable. What's water? Water is the last element in astrology. So there are 4 elements. There's earth, there's fire, there's earth, there's air, and there's water. And when we reach water, we've reached the end of something. So symbolically, every time we reach a water sign, we've reached the end of a cycle, we've reached the end of a chapter, and we've reached the end of something when the sun goes into Scorpio. Water also allows, again, as I said earlier, to create emotional bonds, trust, intimacy, and vulnerability. And water allows us to move on. We need water to help us to transition from one state to another, whether that's symbolic, whether that's literal. If you've ever come to an ending in your life, you've made a major move, you've packed up your life, you've moved many states away, or maybe even thousands of miles away, and there's grief. Because typically we have a natural, as humans, we have a natural grieving process when we go through a big transition in our life. And that's Scorpio. Scorpio, water, grief, but that necessity to move on to another state in our life. So there's a necessity to Scorpio. Sort of why I said earlier, imagine a life where nothing happens. Imagine a life where everything is easy, or you never look within. You will not grow. And maybe you have had times in your life where you sort of looked up and you looked around and you've questioned yourself and you've wondered, how did I get here? Something's missing. I need to figure something out. And usually that's the start of a big period of growth and transformation. Scorpio also reminds us that life inherently is about seasons. So here we are. The seasons are changing. Perhaps they're a little bit different in the southern hemisphere than they are here in the northern hemisphere. The leaves certainly are beautiful colors right now here in central Maryland. I don't know how they are doing in your neck of the woods, but that is a sign of decay. So Scorpio is the end of a life cycle, and we are preparing for something new. So Scorpio will eventually bring us into winter. Winter begins with the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, and then the whole cycle begins again with Aries in the first sign of the zodiac. So if Taurus, the second sign of the zodiac, is the rebirth of life, it's flowers, it's fertility, it's the pleasure of earthly living, then Scorpio is the opposite. Doesn't mean that we can't find pleasure in Scorpio, but it's bittersweet. It is the reminder that everything that blooms, everything that lives needs to die, needs to transition. I know I'm saying the D word, but I am a Scorpio. So that said, this season is again this descent so that there can be an ascent. And Scorpio is a little bit of some mental gymnastics. Scorpio is the 8th sign of the zodiac. So imagine an 8, it has 2 loops, there's these 2 sides, and Scorpio reminds us that life is about duality. Scorpio's 8th sign, so if we were to count out 8 signs from Scorpio, we would reach Gemini. And Gemini shows us that Scorpio has this inherent duality within it. It needs to make choices, and hopefully it needs to make elevated choices. Scorpio is the only sign of the zodiac that has 3 animals. It has the scorpion, which represents the ego, which represents the small self, the self that we all have, because we're humans. And when we have a bad day, we typically revert to our scorpion. But then we have moments in our life, perhaps that's that moment I referred to earlier, where you sort of look up, look around, you question your life, and you question yourself, and you're like, how do I get here? And that brings us to the phoenix. And the phoenix is Scorpio's 2nd animal. And it reminds that each and every one of us, whether we are a Scorpio or not, whether it's Scorpio season or not, we have the ability to call upon the phoenix. And the phoenix allows us to completely immolate ourselves, metaphorically speaking, of course, and to rise from those ashes, which then brings us to our 3rd animal, which is the eagle. And the eagle represents the elevated self. We've transcended our lower self. We've transcended the ego. The ego has gone to, die, so to speak, through the process of the phoenix. And the eagle is the only animal that can look into the sun and not have its eyes burned. So the eagle, now, because it's the 8, we're going to have good days, we're going to have bad days, but the goal is to rise to the eagle. And to use these energies of Scorpio, which are very powerful, because Scorpio is what's called one of the 4 signs of matter. It's part of the cross of matter. Scorpio, I almost said Scorus. Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo. These are the 4 signs of matter in the material world. They really talk about how our physical world is built. And so we have these days where we need to rise above ourselves. And so that said, as we go into Scorpio season tomorrow, so I think it's 6:14 p.m. New York Eastern Time, it represents this period that's very fertile, not Taurus fertile. It's very emotional and internal fertile, to see something about ourselves, to have something revealed. Because the thing about Scorpio, Scorpio is the sign that comes before Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is the 9th sign. It's the sign of wisdom and knowledge. And my joke is, how does Sag get all that wisdom and knowledge? It first has to go through Scorpio. So this is the wheel of life. And the zodiac is the wheel of life. And it's something sometimes we take for granted because we don't always see astrology at that level. But this is the path that we walk each year. This is the path that we walk with our own astrology. These are energies and archetypes that we call upon in different moments, and there's a time to enjoy Taurus. The moon's in Taurus, maybe. We want to enjoy the pleasure, the fertility, the abundance of life, to just take our time, to enjoy the material world. But then there are also times for Scorpio where something has gone past its, let's say, sell-by date. We've reached the end of something. Now it's time to have a natural sense of grief, and so that we can move on. It is not a coincidence that we have Halloween, Samhain, Day of the Dead, all around the same time, because the ancients would mark the 1st of November as this was, I think it's called the cross quarter days. So we have the ancient festivals. I realize, and it used to be that the 1st of November lined up with the middle of Scorpio. That's not the case anymore because of the precession of the equinox. That's a whole other conversation, because the sky moves 1 degree every 72 years. So it says that over time, what was the middle of Scorpio would have been about November 1st. That's not the case anymore. So the real Halloween, so to speak, is around the 7th or 8th, 6th, 7th, or 8th of November. I can't remember, but around that time, that's when the sun reaches the middle of Scorpio. So it's a very powerful time, and that's why the veil is thin. And when the sun goes into Scorpio, it will point its energy over to Mars in Cancer. because Scorpio is ruled by Mars, and rulership shows us where the energy gets pointed. So for example, with Libra season, although we're at the last day of Libra season, the energy of the Libra sun is pointing over to Venus in Scorpio, Venus in Sagittarius. Venus went into Sagittarius last week on Thursday, and Sag energy is fire, element of fire. Libra is air. So it's a little bit more movement, a little bit more travel, speaking, curiosity. But we're really going to feel that water when the sun goes into Scorpio, because the energy is pointing over to Mars and Cancer. So it says at least for the first 2 weeks of Scorpio season, because Mars will be in Cancer until November 3rd. We've got this energy of looking back at the past. Cancer is the first water sign. Scorpio is the second water sign, just for FYI. Pisces is the last water sign. So with this energy of Cancer, don't be surprised if you're feeling a lot of emotions for the next couple of weeks. If something from the past or a memory or something around family, around belonging, around connection, because Cancer gets into these very primal feelings. Do I have enough? Am I safe enough? Can somebody hold me? Because Cancer is a very, it gets into these very young energies, young ages. Symbolically speaking, of course. Aries is birth. Taurus is sort of that sort of needing to be held, needing to be safe. Gemini is crawling. And Cancer really starts to make us aware of our immediate surroundings and our immediate environment. Also, and we'll talk more about this next week, especially as we get to the Scorpio new moon on November 1st, Mars is starting to make its opposition to Pluto. This is actually kind of like an intense, powerful energy. This is the last time that Mars is going to oppose Pluto and Capricorn in our lifetime, because Pluto will leave Capricorn on November 19th. And it just says that, especially as we go into that, I keep wanting to say Cancer new moon, especially as we go into that Scorpio new moon on November 1st, there is this opposition. And opposition is not bad, but it's dynamic. It demands something. We see something for what it is. And Mars and Pluto are typically energies you see in the charts of athletes, like people that can just have this inexhaustible energy. And we're taking that energy with us into November, but also Mars opposite Pluto is a need to reform or transform how we use our Mars. Mars is our desire, it's our motivation, it's our drive, it's what gets us out of bed in the morning. And so there's that energy, whether we realize it or not, it will be very present with us into November. So that said, that is like the big recap of this week. We do have we have Sun square Pluto going into tomorrow. This is that last square to Pluto and Capricorn in our lifetime. So we've got these Pluto energies that are really leading us into Scorpio season. Even though I use traditional rulers, Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio. Maybe you've heard that Pluto is the modern ruler. That's a whole other topic. But it's interesting that Pluto is very present, because Pluto talks about an ability to completely transform or reform, to turn lead into gold, metaphorically speaking. So this is energy of alchemy, spiritual alchemy, emotional alchemy that's taking us into November. So that is your look at this astrology this week. It's pretty light on aspects. It's really just the moon doing the talking. And so there you go. Sun going to Scorpio October 22nd, tomorrow, Tuesday. So let's go through each of the zodiac signs. Listen for your sun, listen for your rising, listen for both, because you have these two overlapping times in your personal astrology, unless you were born at sunrise. But that's a way for you to get more of a deeper, complex look at your astrology. So let's look at each of the 12 signs, starting with Aries. Aries, so Mars is your planet. We've been talking about this the past few weeks. You are coming off of a pretty dynamic solar eclipse in Libra, which is your sign of relationships. That said, because Mars rules you, where do I find you? I find you in the home environment. Mars in Cancer talks about home and family, and certainly that's been the case since the beginning of August, and that will be the case into the beginning of November, because then Mars will change signs on November 3rd. So maybe you've seen a lot of movement in the household. Maybe you are moving. Maybe you're just spending more time at home. Maybe family has demanded more attention over the last few weeks. And maybe you just need to rest and to really figure out where is home and who is home. Keep in mind, especially going into next week and that Scorpio new moon on November 1st, that Mars, and then by whatever, I can't think of the word, Mars is opposing Pluto into the beginning of November. So there is some sort of pressure on you going into the next week or two to reform and transform. Now, I realize that's going to be different for every Aries or Aries rising. You have your own lives, you live your own life, to see how this is relevant for you. Because a reformation or a transformation says, especially because Pluto holds the mirror to us and says, now is a time to look at something and to make a lasting change. That's the thing about Pluto, is it can completely transform something, not unlike clearing a space or ripping out the wiring, or as the other analogy is to turn lead into gold. Scorpio season, Scorpio is your 8th sign, so this is perfect timing, because in order for you to know what to reform and transform, Scorpio season, it says it's time to do a lot of inner looking, a lot of looking at your blind spots, and to see where your fears, where that sense of vulnerability is starting to reveal something to you, because Mars opposite Pluto definitely will give you the power to transform it. Taurus, Venus is your planet, and Venus is currently in Sagittarius. And Sag is an interesting energy because typically Taurus likes to stay close to home. It likes to keep its feet, hooves, whatever, on the ground. And Sagittarius is like, no, we need to travel, we need to explore, we need to see the world. Maybe you're feeling very philosophical. Maybe you're focusing on education, reading up, learning, or even teaching something. Also, Sagittarius is something called your 8th sign. And so this is the time, and I believe this is into the next couple of weeks, where you need to do that. So it sounds like Scorpio season, but you're sort of doing it through Sagittarius to do that descent so that you can do the ascent. What do I mean by that? To do the descent is to go within yourself, to look at something, to face your fears. You're like, I don't want to face my fears, but when we face our, even if it's irrational, when we do that inner work, it's very powerful. It gives us an emotional currency that we can't otherwise gain. So maybe you're using this time to speak to a confidant, to speak to a therapist, or to sit with yourself and to journal and to really see what is moving inside of you. That said, with the sun going into Scorpio, you are going into a season that puts a focus on relationships. Scorpio is a relationship sign for you, especially as we get to that Scorpio new moon on November 1st, that there's something about this time that's, sorry, I'm going to do some quick astrology. It's really talking about relationship choices or relationship dynamics or relationship conversations. Relationships come in a lot of different forms. It's not just your intimate partnership. Maybe even if you're single, this could be a time to bring new people in your life, but to bring people in your life that are either very different than who you've been connecting to your life, or to really look at who you are bringing into your life. Because Mars will be opposite Pluto, and Pluto holds the mirror to us. And sometimes when we have a strong Pluto aspect, we are navigating a theme in a relationship that actually shows us something about us that's unconscious. This is just an example. It's like, why do I keep attracting people into my life that have anger issues? Okay, well, maybe that person or people are reflecting something about anger and standing in your power, or using your anger, or acknowledging your anger that you haven't been able to access. It's just an example. It's kind of how, or at least one of the stock examples that I use with Pluto opposition. So it's a little bit of an intense time, especially as you go into November for relationships. But that said, you are coming off of a solar eclipse. The solar eclipse continues to really put the focus on health and wellness, getting your life organized, cleaning out, and maybe even looking at relationship dynamics through a lens where you sometimes think you're not good enough. So, Gemini, so Mercury is your planet, and Mercury continues to be in Scorpio, although probably not for much longer. Goodness, I have Mercury going in Aries, that is incorrect. Probably Mercury is in Scorpio until next week, so that's sad. So your planet is in Scorpio at the moment, and Scorpio is your sign of organization, projects, schedule, getting things running and smooth. And Scorpio is your sign of operation. So with Mercury there right now, you've been having, let's say, an advanced taste of Scorpio season. So when the sun goes into Scorpio, you begin a season, so 4 weeks. The sun is in Scorpio until like the 22nd of November. It's a season for you to really look at your day-to-day life. What are your duties and responsibilities? What do you need to honor? What do you need to organize? We all have a million things that are sort of circling us, flying around, especially in our modern digital world. How do you simplify? How do you get very clear about what's a priority and not a priority? Because part of being a Gemini or Gemini rising is a work to really, in your own way, to master Gemini. Gemini is, on one hand, the beauty of having options, to be able to try everything, to have curiosity. But then the shadow side is that it becomes scattered, or you don't know what to pick. So Scorpio season is saying you need to get very clear, very discerning, very organized about what's for you and what's not for you. With the energies of Mars opposite Pluto, maybe there is a need to look at health, to make a health change, or to eliminate something from your life that might not be supporting your health and wellness, for example. With Venus and Sagittarius, at least into the 11th of November, this continues to be a time that might be a bit social. There's a lot going on in Gemini's astrology, especially with Jupiter in Gemini, especially with Saturn in Pisces, and this is all in advance of Sagittarius season, kind of jumping ahead to the end of November, but this is a time where maybe the sorting, the organizing, the discernment is in advance of the bigger things that may happen once the sun goes into Sagittarius, the end of November into beginning of December. Especially probably with a Sagittarius new moon on the 1st of December, because all that energy is going to activate in opposition to Jupiter and a square to Saturn. And these two energies are like, we need to get our life organized and focused and take things serious. So like I said, Gemini, come up with a plan, clean things out, get rid of clutter in the brain, because this is all to get very streamlined and focused as you go into the end of the year. Cancer, the moon is your planet, and so this week the moon is coming to the end of its lunar month. In fact, we reach the last quarter moon later this week, and I think even as I record this, the moon is in Cancer. Hey, you are a Cancer or Cancer rising, so every time the moon gets to Cancer, that is sort of your reboot, your restart each month. So the moon is in Cancer, and then it goes into Leo later this week. Leo is a sign of money, income, material stability. So maybe you're focused more on money and income. And then by the weekend, it's in Virgo. Virgo is, let's get cleaned up, let's get organized, let's put things in their place, let's focus on health and wellness. Virgo is also a sign that focuses on communication, speaking, writing, teaching, taking classes. So it might be a little bit of a busy weekend, but also a weekend where it's great for projects and to get organized. That said, we are coming to the end of a pretty powerful lunar month, and one that has put the focus on your home environment, and maybe you're still weighing your options about next steps, where to live, where to move, and maybe you feel like that's not quite relevant for me, Katie. Maybe you're looking at where is home and who is home, because having had an eclipse in this space means that there will likely be some sort of major change in your home or living space into the next year. It won't be the case for everybody, but that's just classic eclipse that's happening. Whether you get married, you start a family, you move, typically it's those types of, these are just examples, those types of things that happen. That said, we are wrapping up a lunar month that, with the sun going into Scorpio on October 22nd and the Scorpio new moon on November 1st, it's putting the focus on something called your fifth sign. So you've got presently Mars in Cancer. Hey, you're Cancer rising. So Mars is really giving you a lot of fire, a lot of motivation, and that's going to kick in even more when the sun goes into Scorpio. Scorpio is your fifth sign. The fifth sign is the sign of play, creativity, self-expression, identity, and really doing the things that light you up and give you joy and give you passion. Yes, it happens to be Scorpio. Scorpio is a fellow water sign just like you. And so I think on some level, especially with Mars in Cancer, it's to really find your spark, find your fire, even though you are a water sign, but to really start to move towards the things that do nourish you, that do light you up, that do give you joy, that do positively affirm who you are. Maybe you're starting something that's like a creative project as you go into November, but that's, November and end of October, November is typically the time for you to take yourself and take your talents seriously. Leo. So the sun is about to go from Libra to Scorpio. Libra is a sign that's what's called your third. The third is education and travel and exploration and a lot of movement. And when the sun goes into Scorpio, it's a time to settle down. So Scorpio forms what's called your fourth sign. And the fourth sign is the sign that forms the base and foundation of your life. It encapsulates home, family, its roots, it's the past, it's memory, it's mom and dad. I realize that some of these subject matters can be a bit complicated, but this is the season for you to get anchored. Getting anchored means that even going into November, you're spending a lot of time at home, making changes in your household. Maybe some of you are preparing for a move, especially with the sun in Scorpio and Mars in Cancer. And Cancer is what's called your last sign. There might be a sense of transition in the home or needing to let something go because Cancer represents a space in your astrology that's about endings. To see how this is relevant for you, of course. We're not quite at that Scorpio new moon of November 1st, but there is this emotional buildup, especially as Mars starts to make its opposition to Pluto into next week. And maybe sometimes it's not about your home environment, but maybe it's about letting something go from the past, and maybe something that you've even carried that you do not need to carry anymore. That said, Scorpio season on a very nuts and bolts level says it's time to spend time with family, to reach out to family. Maybe your family needs more attention. Maybe you're like, I don't have a family. Maybe it is to be with people who are like family, people that you trust, people that could be family even though they're not family. But that said, Leo, Scorpio does form one of what's called your crosses, one of the four directions of your life. And especially with that Pluto going back into Aquarius next month, you're one of those signs, along with Scorpio, along with Taurus, along with Aquarius, where you're in the midst of some sort of tectonic shift in your life, and you may see that shift more, especially as you go into November. Virgo, Mercury is your planet, and it's wrapping up its time in Scorpio. And my little joke about Virgo is that Virgo is like a secret Scorpio because Virgo typically needs a lot of control. And with the Mercury in Scorpio, at least I think it's in Scorpio until the 2nd, so we'll talk about that next week. This has been a time for you to look at projects, look at organization, look at information, look at communication. Mercury in Scorpio typically does not pull its punches. It says things, it can say things that are very blunt, but sometimes necessary because it's crystal clear in its communication. Things will begin to shift next week. Again, we'll talk about that next week. But in the meantime, especially as we get into Scorpio season, you enter a season that's naturally about curiosity. That's about exploration. That's trying things, speaking things, taking classes, learning things. And so there's typically a lot of movement with Scorpio season. Because Scorpio is a sign of voice and communication, do keep in mind that Mars, the ruler of Scorpio, is opposite Pluto into the beginning of November. It's a pretty intense energy. So for Virgo, and maybe a lot of you out there are Virgo rising because it's a common, certainly it's a common rising sign in the Northern Hemisphere, this may be a week, even into next week, to have an intense conversation and sometimes a necessary conversation. It might be a conversation with friends and community. It might be a conversation about the future or social issues or social causes. But in that energy, it's like you can get to the heart of something because, that's the thing about Scorpio is it typically wants to get to the heart of something. It doesn't want to, sort of smooth things over like a veneer, but it says no, if we talk about things open and honestly, that's where there can be a recognition. That's where we can see each other and hopefully understand each other and be able to have a transformation. So it's some intense energy for Virgo, but it's also giving you a chance to really put things in focus, clean things out, and organize, and all in advance of some of the other shifts to happen next week. Libra, it is the last day of your season, so the sun will go into Scorpio on October 2nd, at 6:14 p.m. Eastern, which is New York time, and that means it's no more Libra season. So maybe this is a good time to go back and reflect, because Libra season has also coincided with a solar eclipse. October 2nd, that's what I wanted to say. October 2nd, we had that solar eclipse at 10 degrees of Libra, and it says that there's a lot of emphasis on you, either you're a Libra sun or a Libra rising. And this is our last eclipse in Libra. We will have no more eclipses in Libra for another 9 years. We will have one more eclipse in Aries, your relationship sign. That will be next March. We'll talk about that another time. But you are starting to come to an end of a very dynamic time where you may have seen major events and personal milestones and transitions since 2023. I know I say this every week, but I can go through a list of Libra rising people in my brain. You've gotten married, you have babies, you've had people transition, you've made major moves, you've made major career changes. Like, those are the sort of things that have been happening for your sign. Of course, maybe you're like, that's not relevant to me, maybe it's other things, but it's hopefully for you to see how this is relevant in your life. Now, with the sun going into Scorpio, Scorpio is something called your second sign, the sign of money, income, material stability, and security. We're all human beings. We need the basics, food, shelter, some form of resource and currency. It doesn't mean that you like this is about lots of money, but it's a time to look at, what does your material life look like? Do you have what you need? Maybe you are making purchases or trading or gathering things that you need in order to create a solid material life. To, again, roof over the head, I hope, roof over your head, some sort of food and that sort of thing. And Scorpio is a sign of wealth. It's one of the money signs. Scorpio and Taurus are the money signs. And so this could be a time where you're looking at property and assets, looking at the money that you spend, maybe future plans to invest or future plans around assets and property. Maybe you want to buy a home, get a mortgage. Those are the ways in which money could show up in your life, especially around that Scorpio new moon. Now, keep the new moon is on the 1st of November. Keep in mind that Mars is a major player in your astrology. It's in Cancer at the moment, and Cancer is your sign of career. It's your public reputation. It's your duties and responsibilities in the world. And so maybe it's a busy time in your professional life. And Mars is opposing Pluto all week and into next week. Pluto is coming to the end of a very long chapter, 16 years, in your home environment. It has encapsulated a period of your life where you've needed to do major emotional restructuring. For some of you, that has spoken to changes in your family. Some from you have cut family out. Some people have made major healings around family, or maybe it's not family per se. Maybe it's your inner life, your emotional life, and really feeling rooted and stable and grounded. So today, as I speak, and even in tomorrow, this is our last Sun square Pluto and Capricorn in our lifetime. So as you go into Scorpio season, really reflect on the personal changes you've made over the last decade, the inner landscape, how that has changed, and hopefully how you feel more rooted and grounded in this life, I hope. And all of this is, especially with Pluto about to come to leave Capricorn, it will do that on November 19th. It's just to take stock. Yeah, there you go. Scorpio, happy early birthday, Scorpio. How is it? How is it Scorpio season? I'm really confused. I guess time is flying again, but believe it or not, tomorrow, October 22nd, the sun will go into Scorpio, and you will start your birthday season. Libra season, which is what's called your 12th sign, that's the end of your personal zodiac and calendar. It has represented the need to come to the end of something. You also had an eclipse here. That eclipse was on October 2nd. So this sort of, maybe not veneer is not the right word, but this sort of umbrella of inner search, inner work, coming to the end of something will be a thread that takes you even into 2025. That said, the sun going to Scorpio isn't just the start of your birthday season. It is a rebirth, and especially if you are Scorpio rising, it is a time when the sun crosses the threshold of your life and you restart your personal calendar, in addition to your birthday if you have another sun sign and you're Scorpio rising. This Scorpio season, Mars is in Cancer, and Cancer is something called your 9th sign. So when the sun goes into Scorpio, it will put the spotlight on Mars in Cancer, and it talks about this process that's been happening over, let's say, since the beginning of August, to really share what you believe in, share what you stand for, to talk about your faith, to share your wisdom and knowledge, to teach, to travel. Maybe it's to plan a long distance foreign travel, for example. But this has been a time to really demonstrate something, demonstrate your wisdom and knowledge, demonstrate what you believe in. And for some Scorpios, it is about legal matters, but that's, for a small subset, because it's part of the chart can also talk about legal matters. But when the sun goes into Scorpio, then it's about that part of the chart. So you may find the Scorpio season that you are teaching more, sharing more, maybe on your soapbox more. But the point is to be an advocate for something, because the role of the 9th sign is to illuminate. It is to take something that we have illuminated ourselves and to help to illuminate it for other people. However, that is relevant, of course, in your life. Now, if you are, let's say, your birthday is, let's say, gosh, I don't know why it's so hard to speak. If your birthday is in the beginning of Scorpio season, which means the last week of October, you're waiting for that energy of new beginnings. And so maybe you're finding that this is a birthday year that you have to do a little bit more inner searching and inner work. With the Scorpio new moon, especially if your birthday is the 1st of November, plus or minus a couple of days, it's a powerful new year for you, but it also brings that energy of new beginnings and reset for your sign. Keep in mind that Mars, especially going into November, Mars will change signs on November 3rd. We'll talk about that next week. But Mars is opposite Pluto. So there is a big push on Scorpio, whether you are Scorpio rising or Scorpio sun, to make a reformation or a transformation. That is that's what Pluto is meant to do. It is an evolutionary planet. So it may mean that you need to evolve or transform how you think about something, how you speak about something, how you listen about something, how you write, how you communicate, and even these themes I was talking about a few moments ago, what you believe in, what you stand for. So it's a lot of pressure. And to give it its due, Scorpio needs to do that inner work, the inner reflection. Sometimes you can journal it out, write it out, speak it out with a therapist. And that might reveal something to you, because that's, like I said, Pluto is an evolutionary planet. But this is all in advance of that really powerful new moon in your sign that kicks off your birthday season. And it's going to be a very interesting one, especially with that Mars opposite Pluto. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, Jupiter is your planet, and Jupiter is still in Gemini. I talk about this every week. It'll be in Gemini until May. Yes, May 2025. So we got time. And overall, this continues to be a time for Sagittarius to get social, to spend time with people, to interact, to maybe even focus on relationship. And for some Sagittarius rising, it may even be the start of a serious relationship. I say serious because Jupiter is square Saturn, and that's the bar that Saturn is setting for Jupiter right now, is that this is not just about romance and having fun. Jupiter and Gemini, trying everything, sampling everything. Saturn is saying, no, this is about the people, even if it's not romantic, the people that are going to be the support and make up the roots of your life. That's where the energy is. So with the Jupiter-Saturn square into 2025, you got really Saturn over your shoulder for a lot of things. It's like, hey, Sag, it's time to grow up. Hey, Sag, it's time to really get focused. Hey, Sag, it's time to take this seriously. And maybe you are. And that's you're like, okay, check. And Saturn really talks about the major personal milestones. So this may mean even going into 2025 is a time for personal milestones. That said, Scorpio season, the sun going to Scorpio, reaches the end of your personal calendar, because Scorpio is your 12th sign. So this is the sign that comes before your birthday. So Scorpio season, if it takes you to the end of your calendar, it's to use the next 4 weeks, especially after that Scorpio new moon on November 1st, to look inward, to look at spirituality, to question meaning, to search for deeper meaning and connection in your life, to rest, to recuperate, because that's the role of the 12th. The 12th can either take us into a period of isolation, the 12th can either take us into a place of like really sacred inner contemplation, for example. It's just how you want to live it. And so with that Scorpio new moon, it will really highlight the energies of Mars in Cancer. That's a little bit interesting for you, Sagittarius, because Mars has been in Cancer since the beginning of August. Wait, is that right? Yeah. And it's meant that August and September, is that right? Now I gotta go back and look. So yeah, maybe it's, well, anyway, it was like four weeks ago. That's not beginning of August, but anyway, so there's still been this time to really have a lot of deeper emotional stuff come up in your life, because Mars is in something called your 8th. And the 8th is where it talks about intimacy and vulnerability, trust and power and control. With Mars opposite Pluto into next week, you may feel a lot of uncomfortable emotions come up, and you're like, no, I don't want that. But that's the thing, it's time. That's what astrology tells us, that it's time. If something uncomfortable is coming up, sit with it, examine it, because with the sun in Scorpio, it's time to let it go. So Pluto is in your second sign of money and income. It has been there since 2008. And maybe this is about self-worth, value, safety, stability. Maybe it's something about money and literal money. Maybe it's metaphoric. But this is time to really, truly transform something and to do this inner work, because things are going to start to move and heat up. Mars will go into Leo beginning of November 3rd. Leo is a fire sign. You're a fire sign. A lot more movement, a lot more, especially as we get into the end of November, beginning of December, your season. We all got that Jupiter and Saturn energy. So use this time to rest, reflect, do the inner psychic inventory, because things are going to get really moving at the end of the year. Capricorn, so Saturn is your planet still in Pisces, and so this continues to be a time for you to focus on money, income, material stability, security. I know it's a long transit, 3 years, yes, 3 years. In fact, in 2025, you'll just have a little preview of a new chapter when Saturn goes into Aries. We'll talk about that later. But this continues to be a time for you to shore up your material life. Now, every Capricorn is not your material life. This is about voice and community. I'm thinking about Aquarius. Sorry, it continues to be about voice and communication and how you think and listen and learn. So this continues to be a time for you to shore up how you think, how you speak, how you listen. You're taking classes. You're really weighing your options. You're being in the curiosity of life with Saturn and Pisces. This is a time where it's kind of interesting because Capricorn is so much about matter and the material world, the things you can touch, the things you can, quantify, but Pisces you can't quantify. It continues to be a time for you to really make choices that benefit something that may not make sense on paper. It may not immediately pay off right now. It may not be for your bottom line, but it will later, because Pisces says this is nourishing something that's very deep. And even though this doesn't have a dollar sign or whatever currency connected to it, it actually has a lot of value. And so you continue to do that weighing of the material world and the spiritual world, the things that really mark your physical life, but also the things that fill your physical life. And that's part of the choices that you're making at the moment. When the sun goes into Scorpio, you're starting to reach the end of your personal zodiac calendar, because when the sun goes into Capricorn, that's the start. Scorpio is your 11th sign. So bare minimum, this is a time for you to look at community, social connection. Who are my friends? Who do I spend time with? Even what's my role in my community? Do I feel isolated? Do I feel like I have people that I can trust and people I'm connected to? And so on a very nuts and bolts level, it's to really build community over the next 4 weeks, to spend time with people that are allies, or to get in that Scorpio sense of discomfort, because we can't live in isolation. There is the Mars-Pluto opposition this week, because you're a Capricorn. It's a bit of a spicy one, because Cancer, where Mars is at the moment, is your relationship sign. So you may see a lot of back and forths around relationship and power dynamics, and maybe even relationships with friends and community. Keep in mind that Pluto is coming to the end of its time in Capricorn. It will not return ever in your life. So take stock of a lot of the personal work and transformation that you've done since 2008, because this continues to be a time, even if it's just for the next 4 weeks, for you to capitalize on really making the transformations that you need to make. Use it. Pluto certainly has carved a path in your life since 2008, but also Pluto has created space for you to use. So here you are, 4 more weeks. Use it, Capricorn. Aquarius, Saturn is your planet. I started to say this, but I said it for Capricorn. I meant to say it for you. So I know it's a long transit because your planet, Saturn, moves so slowly. So this continues to be a time in your life where it's really about money and your material world. Now, every Aquarius is different. So on one Aquarius, this might be literally about money and property and looking at spending and looking at the things you own, and really trying to make deeper decisions about where you want to spend your money, what's truly important to you and what's not important to you. For some Aquariuses, this is about how much money you have. Do I have enough for groceries? Do I have enough for this? I'm not saying that's going to be the case for everybody, but Saturn, typically wherever Saturn is, even if Saturn rules you, there is a work. So the work now into beginning of 2026, the work is about money and income. If it's not your material life, it is also self-worth and value. Knowing your value and worth, and really getting very concrete about that. Pisces continues to be a lens for you because Saturn's in Pisces, and Pisces has a very different currency and very different values than other signs, because Pisces says this has to not just make sense materially, this has to make sense spiritually. It's like, I don't care if they pay me $1 million, first it has to feed my soul. And that might be something that is coming up at this time. That said, Scorpio season, Scorpio is a major sign in your personal astrology because Scorpio is something called your 10th sign. The 10th sign represents the top of your personal astrology, so the sun has reached the highest point in the sky, and this will be into around the 21st, 22nd of November. So on a very nuts and bolts level, this is a time for you to focus on your professional life. Whether you have a job, whether you need to find a new job, especially after that Scorpio new moon on November 1st, this says this is a time for you to stand in your power. Keep in mind, Aquarius, that Mars, your career planet, is in Cancer, and I gotta do some quick astrology. Cancer is your a 6th sign, and so this will be something about projects or really needing to put things in order or operations. And Mars is going to be opposite Pluto. And we'll talk about this later. Pluto is going to go back into Aquarius on November 19th. So you are wrapping up a 16-year chapter of a lot of deep inner psychic excavation. As you go with the sun in Scorpio, especially the Scorpio new moon, November 1st, throughout November, it is to really stand in your power, to capitalize on all the inner psychic work that you've done, to be able to hopefully make good decisions, and good decisions that are in alignment with Saturn and Pisces. It has to feed my soul, not just my bottom line. But this will be a very powerful time for you, and it may mean it might even be a little bit of an intense November. Finally, Pisces. Pisces, Jupiter is your planet, so this is a time in your personal calendar. Your personal calendar has a 11-12 year cycle. Yes, you heard me correctly, 11 to 12 years. Because Jupiter, your planet, takes about a year to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs. So 2024 to 5 is about home and family. It doesn't quite line up with the start of our year, but in your calendar, which has its own time, this started in May of 24 to May of 25. That is your time to focus on your home environment, your living situation. Maybe you're spending more time at home. Maybe you're more emotionally invested in creating a family or creating a sense of home and connection. Maybe it's more philosophical and longing, where is home and who is home? This continues to be a big time for Pisces because you still have Saturn in Pisces. You still have Saturn looking over your shoulder and saying, Pisces, this is time to step up, to grow up, to take things seriously, to stand on your own 2 feet, and to start to really make something concrete, because Saturn talks about the things that are concrete. And so maybe you've seen major milestones over the past year or two. Maybe you will continue to see major milestones, especially as we go into Sagittarius season. But Jupiter continues to be in the square to Saturn. So a lot is being asked of you. Use this energy proactively. Like, if you take on a role of leadership, take over something, say yes to the right things, say no to the right things, put things in order, think about the future. And maybe with Scorpio season, Scorpio is something called your 9th sign. It's a season for you to look out into the world, to really think about, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What do you think is true? What do you think, what's your wisdom? What's your knowledge? And maybe over the next 4 weeks, you're doing more speaking, more sharing, more teaching. But the role of the 9th sign, Scorpio is your 9th sign. It's to illuminate. And maybe it's to take something that you have learned and to help to illuminate it for other people in whatever way that this is relevant for your life. And maybe on a very surface level, you are taking classes into November. Maybe you are planning a long distance journey, or maybe you're just getting really philosophical about your life. What do I want? Where am I going? Because especially when the sun goes into Sagittarius later in November, beginning of December, it's still that like big time in your life. And so maybe you need to get a little bit your sights on the horizon to figure out where you want to go and what's important. So that is your look at the astrology of this week. This has been the look at October 21st through 27th, 2024. Again, my name is Katie Sweetman. This has been Empowering Astrology. You can follow me online at empoweringastrology.com. You can book a consultation with me. I always love working with people. I know some of you are actually clients who are on the live, and even if you've never worked with me before, I hope that we can connect soon. So all the details on my website, empoweringastrology.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Spotify, I'm on YouTube. You can sign up also for my weekly newsletter. So all the links are in the show notes. And thank you all for this week. And I will see you all next week for Halloween. Take care. Bye-bye.